Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Anna, and today I have a very special poetry book talk for you guys. This is one that I have been waiting, kind of holding back on reviewing for various reasons. Just because it's really special, and I wanted to take my time and read it more than once so that I had a better review for you guys. So the book that we're going to be reviewing today is called Helium by Rudy Francisco. I don't know if you are all aware of the group Button Poetry. They sponsor and host poetry contests, spoken word and written, and that's actually where I found out about Rudy, was through them on YouTube. I watched a ton of his spoken word poems and fell in love with the way that he was able to write and describe life. And then I found out that he had a book out, and I was super excited to buy it and read it, and I finally got around to doing that. I read it twice, and I've read certain poems multiple times just because they are that good. And so as I was going over the book, writing notes about the things I was going to be saying in this, I really saw the genius in his work and how he organized every section, and he managed to encompass so many different concepts into one book in such a beautiful and succinct and concise way that I was so excited to film this video to talk about it. The first thing I want to say about this book, it's very simple, and I really appreciate that. There's not very much art, which sadly for me that was a little disappointing because I do really love artwork in poetry books, but the poems make up for that entirely. I really loved the cover in the first place. There was a spoken word poem about love where the girl's favorite color was this mint green, and everyone in the comments had commented and been like, his book is mint green, that must be why he chose the color. I don't know if that's why he chose this color. All I have to say is that I really do love the color and the concept of rising, which is what helium does to balloons. And in the book you can definitely see the progression, the rising, the growth that takes place. So there are only 4 parts in the book. Sadly, to me it was way too short. And they're not very long sections, but very distinct in the concepts that they talk about. They're not titled, they're just 1, 2, 3, and 4. Within all of these sections there are poems about love, about loss, about forgiveness, depression, race, violence, hope, new life, masculinity, and honesty. And those are all concepts that are circling our society, and people are questioning and reassigning meaning and reevaluating themselves within these concepts. And so I really do feel like this book is very apt, not just for women but also for men, to sort of reevaluate the way that they see, the roles that they have in society. But the first section was really a really nice introduction. I want to talk specifically about the first 2 poems. The first poem starts with the concept of drowning. He tells a story about when he was a young kid, his brother and his friends realized that he didn't know how to swim, and so they chucked him in to a body of water. I don't remember if it was a pool or a lake or whatever, and just sort of decided that was the best way to teach him how to swim, to just chuck him in and see if he survived. And they had to pull him out because that didn't work out well. And he equates that feeling to the feeling of walking into a room full of people. How it's an ocean of, I guess, feelings and emotion, and I guess the sense of feeling overwhelmed. And that is something that I do personally relate to. I really don't like parties or big crowds, and so I do relate to the feeling of walking into a full room and just being like, you feel like you're drowning. And so that was really a really nice way of starting. And then the next poem talks about the morning and how the sun rose to see you, and how the day wants to be noticed, and all of these really hopeful, strengthening concepts about waking up, and despite the overwhelming feelings that you may have, just sort of like, you can do it, like the day wants you to be in it, so do your best. That kind of feeling is what I got for it. It was really uplifting to me to see someone portray that within 2 poems that sort of had nothing to do with each other, but yet were ordered in a way where it was like, yes, I'm feeling overwhelmed, yes, I'm feeling like I'm drowning in life, but I'm still gonna get up and I'm still gonna do my best to survive. Like, that to me was something that is is really relatable and something that we do need to hear more often, because a lot of times we don't realize just how many people go through that feeling. I just want to go over my favorite poems from each section. So this first section has a lot to do with love. He claims that he's not a love poet, and I don't think that he's solely a love poet. I don't think any poet is solely a love poet, but he claims he's not a love poet, but his love poems are unbelievably lovely. So my favorite poems actually have to do, all of them, with love. My honest poem, actually, in fact, all of the poems that I'm going to list are poems that he performs in spoken word. So I will be putting the links to those in the description, and if you guys want to go and watch him perform that, I definitely recommend it. There is something so much more special about watching a poet perform his own poetry. You get more out of it, I think. So anyways, my favorite poems from this section were my honest poem, If I Was a Love Poet, again, and sorry, I have to read this last title because it's super long. The last poem that I liked was To the Girl Who Works at Starbucks Down the Street from My House on Delmar Heights Road. I swear to God, I'm not a stalker. That poem was really, really lovely as well. The second section dives deeper. I feel like this book is all about the layers of Rudy Francisco, and probably subsequently people who relate to the things that he's been through. So the second section is a little bit darker. It has to deal with depression, with pain, loss, breakup, heartbreak, past mistakes, and a false sense of masculinity. So I guess you could say toxic masculinity. It sort of delves into his, I guess, more of his personal life. He went through a breakup and had to find out that the girl that he broke up with was dating someone two days later after they broke up, and just like the way that he had to deal with that, and I don't know, it was very painful. One of the poems that I liked was called Museum. It related pain to a museum, and I've often thought of that concept of how a lot of times when we are in pain, especially as writers, as creators, as musicians, actors, whatever, anybody who's in the arts, when we are in pain, we create, and out of that pain and those works of art, a lot of times people gravitate towards them, and it's a livelihood. It becomes a livelihood a lot of times, and oftentimes, as a sort of consequence of that, the pain becomes like this museum where people go to view it as a sort of, I guess, way of relating but being distant. And so I've often thought of that concept of how pain nowadays, people take it and they turn it into money, and nothing is innately wrong with that, but I think a lot of times you can end up romanticizing it because it's such a widely felt emotion. People tend to take it for granted, I think, or find ways of maybe not taking it as seriously. That's my opinion anyways. So I really liked that poem for sort of bringing that to light and touching on that subject. He also has a couple poems about this type of toxic masculinity, and admits that he himself has he himself has participated in perpetuating that stereotype, and basically apologizing to the people that he has been toxic to, because, poetry is nothing if it's not honest. At least good poetry, to me, is nothing if it's not honest. So to see him say, yes, I did participate in this idea of toxic masculinity, and at the time, I thought that was what it was supposed to be like, but now I realize I was wrong, and like in doing those things and treating people a certain way, it didn't bring me any sense of power. It actually made me feel worse on the inside. And so it was a really good insight into one man's view of masculinity and how it needs to be changed. The last thing that I do want to say about section 2 is that he ends it really well. I really do like how he ends each of his sections. Whenever he talks about something dark or something that is probably deeper than the light fluffy stuff, he does end it with idea of hope, or idea that things can get better. The last poem has to do with a fight that he had with a girl, and how they threw these mean words at each other, but yet he leaves with this sense of hope. Actually, I'm going to read it because I can't put it in a better way than he does. so this is after the fight, I heard there's a woman in Palestine who makes flower pots out of tear gas grenades. From this I learned the explosion is not how the story has to end. In other words, even when things seem to be destined for disaster, the story doesn't always have to end in catastrophe. And that's definitely something I have come to find out in my own life as I grow up, as I experience new things. Things that I originally thought were going to be, disastrous or embarrassing for me, they don't necessarily have to end that way. And a lot of times the reason that things do end badly is because of the choices that we make and the decisions that affect how a situation ends. So section 3 is sort of a look inward and outward in himself, I guess, as a person, and then sort of like the things that surround him immediately that have made him the person that he is. So the topics for section 3 were race and violence, family, camaraderie, the concept of freedom in America, and he ends it with mercy, which I loved. That is such a... The idea of mercy is such a abstract concept, I think, in the world that we live in, and yet it is such an important factor in life. And I think that was something that I wasn't expecting. So he has a lot of poems in section 3 having to do with his background, his history as growing up as an African American in America, and having to deal with the fear of the law enforcement, and I guess fear of himself, as well as not being as courageous as he would have wanted to be as a child, how that sort of affected him later on in his life. He talks about family, about his mother, brother, sister, father. I really loved the brother poem. It really highlighted the fact that not all family is blood, and the idea that if I call you brother, I'm going to be there for you no matter what. You're always going to have one other person who's got your back, and I really loved that idea. So my favorite poems from section 3 were Rifle 2, Mercy, and Brother, as I said before. Just a really great third section to sort of round out the book and give us a better sense of who Rudy is as a person. And the last section was really important. After talking about the pain and the loss and heartbreak and your past, he ends it with hope. He ends it with topics of forgiveness, of perspective, of courage, of new life. He has a daughter, and he has a poem about the day that she was born. Beautiful poem. The importance of solitude, which I think a lot of times is missed, and sort of contemplating you as a person. We often think that people are the reasons why we have to be a certain way, or they're going to fulfill a lot of the insecurities that we have, whereas it's really important to take time and be your own person and discover who you are separate of anybody else, because the reality is that no one is going to fulfill the insecurities that you have. The only person who can get over that is you. And so in going into friendships or relationships, or just the relationships that you already have, going into those with those insecurities, you're going to inevitably put pressure on those people to make you better, and they can't do that. Only you can do that. And he has a poem about learning how to be alone and be okay with being with yourself, and that was a really important concept for me, especially in this season of my life where I'm going through that at the moment. So my favorites from section 4 were Complainers, Yes, and Capacity. Section 4 was definitely my favorite. Just after reading everything that he had wrote, seeing how he has grown and the growth within the poetry, it really did give me hope for my own writing and my own personal growth, that anything is possible, and I really did appreciate that. So that's all I have for this poetry book review. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you guys have any comments about Helium or Rudy Francisco or any other poets that you love and want me to review, please leave them down in the comments. I will definitely try and get to those. Also, like I said before, I'm going to put links in the description for his spoken word poems. I highly recommend that you go watch them. They're not very long, and they're so profound, and it's so much better to hear his voice and see how he wanted them to be read or thought of. It does add a whole nother level of depth to his poems. Also, before I go, please don't forget to follow me on Instagram. I have a poetry Instagram account, and I would love if you guys would follow me and tell me what you think about my own poetry. It's definitely something that I'm working on perfecting. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!